Good evening. I'm Larry Souter, and welcome to Stories of Amazing Grace. We're coming to you from Bixler Chapel at the Madison Church of Christ in Madison, Tennessee. Some of you are watching on YouTube, Facebook, Creative Motion Network, and some are listening by way of radio through the facilities of World Christian Broadcasting. Glad that you're with us and glad that you're a part of our live audience. Well, our theme scripture comes from Romans 8:38 through 39, and I am convinced that nothing can ever separate us from God's love. Neither death, nor life, neither angels, nor demons, neither our fears for today, nor our worries about tomorrow. Not even the powers of hell can separate us from God's love. Our guest tonight is one of our own here at the Madison Church of Christ. Debbie Leeper is here, and she's going to talk about that little girl that kept pushing. She's a self-described, and I emphasize self-described, oddball, and a retired anesthesia nurse. She's going to share how the grace of God was part of the highs and lows of her move from Flint, Michigan to here in Nashville. And she's going to talk about a marriage that ended in divorce, the death of a child, obesity, how she survived a life-threatening illness, and her passion for rescuing wild animals. And you'll meet Debbie right after this.
So this is one of the squirrels that I released 2 weeks ago. She's gone. We're singing Born Free in the background, and she just jumped on me from the bird feeder, and here I am again. Yeah, here's another nut, whatever. Yeah. She just, it's Maggie Lou. It's so delicious. So good. Yum. Oh my gosh, that's good stuff. And so sweet and so precious. Here, chin up. Chin up. There it is. Okay. We'll say good night, folks. Good night. Hi, I'm Deborah Leeper, and I want to tell you a story about a little girl who just kept on pushing. From Flint, Michigan to Nashville, Tennessee.
Have a seat. Thank you for being with us. Well, I saw on your Facebook site, and to go along with this video, you had a question and an answer. How do you catch a squirrel?
How do I catch a squirrel?
How do you catch a squirrel?
I haven't ever caught a squirrel.
Well, on your Facebook said the answer is you act like a nut.
Well, that's right. That comes natural.
Is that true?
Yeah, I'm sure it is.
Well, you're a self-described oddball. Now, I don't always think of you as an oddball.
Good.
Let me look at some photos here. We have a baby picture here.
Oh.
Now, this doesn't look like an oddball to me. And we have one here with you in an airplane. Tell me the story behind this.
My father loved airplanes, and I grew up with an airplane or two out in the field that we flew to little dawn patrols. I had little outfits that matched, and we would go on Sunday morning, we would go on dawn patrols, and everybody with a private plane would meet for breakfast in some predetermined town at a restaurant, and we'd have breakfast together, and then...
Now, once a month you would go to breakfast in the plane, is that correct?
Well, the breakfast was was where we flew to, but I got airsick every time and threw up all the way home every time, but it didn't seem to bother anybody.
Yeah. Well, why do you say you were an oddball?
I guess I never felt that I fit in anywhere particularly. I admired so many different people and so many different events and talents and things, but I never, and I could get involved with different groups like in school and band and things like that, but I never really felt like I was on the inside of any of that.
You had friends in school though, didn't you?
I did, but we were all oddballs. We were
okay.
A special clique of oddballs.
Okay. We have another shot here of a high school grad picture, I believe.
Oh boy.
You don't look too odd there either.
Well.
That's a good-looking lady.
That's...
What, this 18 probably? 19? 18 or 19?
17.
17, okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yep.
Were you not happy in Michigan? Why did you come to Nashville? What's the story there?
Well, I was always interested in going to church, even as a toddler. At some point, they let me get on a church bus at 3.5 years old because I just teased to go to church. And so they let me go on the church bus. They didn't take me, but they sent me. And I would go with any neighbor, anybody that would take me. I just seemed like I was just born wanting to go to church. And I loved Jesus, and I loved God, and
Your parents were Christians?
my parents were not Christians.
They were not.
They would have identified with Christians if you gave them an application and said, are you Protestant, Jewish, whatever, but they would have said Christians.
Okay.
But they weren't churched, and they weren't Bible readers. We had a Bible, and there was a rule that you never put your glass on it, and you never put any other book on top of it. And I think there were flowers being pressed in it, but we never read it. And I just longed for church, and so they let me go. I went to every imaginable church, any neighbor that would take me. And the year that I was 17, I was visiting at a Church of Christ, and there was a neighbor that would let me ride with them, and I kind of got it. I started to understand. It's funny, with a teenager, they won't always teach you, but they'll take you to church. I would have been wide open for somebody to teach me, but it never occurred to them to really teach me anything. Just come go with us. And I just, over time, I started to understand.
Did you think you could not comprehend?
I don't know. Maybe just a kid, and I'm the only kid there without any family. You know, you're just the odd kid at church. And anyway, I obeyed the gospel. I was baptized at 17. And I was getting ready to start nursing school the next year, and that was my goal. And when I finished nursing school, I went to work in the hospital where I'd been born and where my mother was born, Hurley Hospital, Flint, Michigan. And I expressed a concern to one of my elders, who was good to talk to, that I just was afraid I'd fall through the cracks, there were two of us my age in the congregation of 250 people. And there was nobody in my family that was really there to support my being involved at church, although I had a little car and I could go now. But he said, so move. And I said, where? Where do I move? And he said, to the Bible Belt. And I said, well, I've never heard that term before. That wasn't a term we used at my house. And I said, where is that? And he said, well, Nashville, Memphis. And so, being the little Yankee girl that I was, I wrote the Chamber of Commerce in Nashville and Memphis and said, I'm thinking of moving to your city. Why should I?
Really? Yeah. And what did they say?
Well, I got back from Memphis. I got Elvis and recordings and smokestacks. And in Flint, Michigan, I'd had all the factories that I could ever want. Everybody was generational factory people.
That was in Flint.
In Flint. And then when I saw Nashville, and I saw that they'd built Centennial Park with the Parthenon to celebrate, and that we had at that time 164 institutions of higher learning in Nashville, and they called it the Athens of the South.
And those institutions included?
Barber school,
Everything.
everything.
Okay.
And so I just decided it was Nashville. I'd never been here. But because I'd written the Chamber of Commerce and Beverly Briley was mayor, he sent me a cassette tape with the Jordanaires singing on it, which at that time, Ray Walker was a member of the church here at Madison, but I didn't know that at the time. And I saw all the beautiful things in Nashville, and it was so green, and I decided I'd move to Nashville. And I started getting calls from Vanderbilt and Baptist Hospital offering me different jobs. And it was 10 months before I moved, but they would call and say, well, this is available, think about that. And when I got to town, I went to an interview at Baptist, and that's as far as I got. The director of nursing was a Christian, and I fell in love with her and her ways, and I went to work at Baptist Hospital. I went and I rented a one-bedroom apartment on White Bridge Road and rented furniture and moved back down here for good in 2 weeks, and have never regretted being here. I just knew God wanted me to be here.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's always been the right thing for me to do, to be here. And as time went on, some of my family moved here, and some of my family became Christians. And around Madison, I'd been here for years and years, but when my mother moved here, she started working for Meals on Wheels and doing all kinds of things. And when she first came, they'd say, "Now, aren't you Deborah Leeper's mother?" By the time she'd been here 10 years, I started hearing, "Now, are you B.J. Braden's daughter?" And I would say, "Yes, and I've been here since 1973. But they loved her so much.
Did you shop around with other churches?
I came to town on White Bridge Road, so I went to West End. And I met Jim Bill McIntyre. At that time, Dan Dozier was a teenager with Mark McIntyre and Walt Lever. And I'd been there about a week, and I went in to see Jim Bill, and I said, I came down here to be with the Christians, and I've been here for a week. Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday, and so far nobody spoke to me. And he said, "Well, this is families, they're talking with each other. Let's just send you to Camp Weeby as the nurse backup person." I was an intensive care nurse, and they sent me to back up the first aid nurse that had been going to camp for years and years and years. It was Dan Dozier's mother. And so I was in the cabin, and a little boy came to the cabin. They're always used to her. She's in a white nurse uniform with a cap up in the woods, and I was in cut-off blue jeans and a sweatshirt. The little boy came in and he said, "I hurt my finger." And I said, "Well," he says, "Miss Dozier here?" I said, "No, but I'm here, and we'll just wash that finger and put some Neosporin and a Band-Aid on it. We'll get you right back out to play." And he looked at me and he said, "I believe I'll wait for Miss Dozier."
Really? We have a shot of you as a nurse graduate, I think. Now, is this in Michigan or here?
It's Michigan.
This is
That's
Michigan.
RN school.
Okay, but you went to nursing school?
In Michigan.
But here, you went to...
Anesthesia school.
Tell me about that experience.
Well, I went to work at Baptist, and I decided to take an easy job, which was IV therapy, second shift. I could do that with my eyes closed. I was kind of tired from what I was doing in Michigan, burn unit and intensive care. And everybody else was part-time on second shift, and they were all students moonlighting from the anesthesia school. And it just kind of happened. I just kind of got involved and interested, and pretty soon I went to work for the anesthesia group at Baptist, just starting their IVs and sitting with different patients for them. And I applied to anesthesia school and got in, which really surprised me. And went to anesthesia school in 1973 to 75. And they farmed you out on the second year to Meharry and General and St. Thomas and the prison and little outside hospitals around Carthage and Hartsville and places. And you just went out on your own, you and maybe another student, and did a year of anesthesia, and then you graduated and went to work. That's what I did.
So you like putting people to sleep?
Well, that's free. Going to sleep is free, but we make that charge for waking back up.
That's the hard part.
Even the vets can put them to sleep.
Tell me how you met your husband.
My best friend in anesthesia school told me that she and her family knew a young man who was in prison. They felt like he shouldn't be in prison, and they were very sad that he was in prison, and that she'd been out to visit him some. He was now out here at Centennial in the prison that looks like the castle, Disney World Castle.
You're right.
And she was going to visit him some, and he expressed a desire to have a Bible study. And so she'd never had a Bible study with anybody, and that was kind of my thing. I mean, I didn't know everything, but I could show my little film strip series, and they could know basically what they needed to know. And so we couldn't show film strips, but she asked me to go out and help her study with him the Bible in prison. He wasn't behind the wall, he was a trustee, so we kind of sat at a picnic table on the riverbank and studied the Bible. And I didn't really like her going out there. I didn't think that she should be at the prison. Maybe if you're going to do prison ministry, go to the women's prison if you're a lady, But this was a personal situation where her family just thought the world of him, and so I went. And over the next few months, I found myself really in love with him. And as a result of that, I went to see him every day without missing a day for 3 years. Mm-hmm. And we cooked Thanksgiving dinner out there at the picnic table, and his parents came, and we petitioned the governor for an executive clemency, and It took years. He was out there, I think, a total of about 7.5 years. He was stabbed in the heart while he was there.
Really?
And was brought to Meharry on a night when I'd have been the call person before I knew him. But my grandfather died in Michigan, so I was gone. So I missed meeting him then. And then in the summer, out at the prison with the shirt off, I said, "What's that scar?" And he told me, and I realized he was the guy that came into the ER and arrested and got his heart fixed at Meharry. And so I met him and I married him when he got out of prison, which he eventually got an executive clemency.
I see a picture of him. Now, was this a good decision or a bad decision? It was at the time. You thought it was good, but as you reflect back, was it a mistake?
It's the only decision I never had second thoughts about as I made it. I was certain that God wanted me to marry him. It's the only thing I've ever done that I was absolutely certain of. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, little Sunday school girls don't know much about sociopathic behavior. We're no match for somebody like that. And that's kind of what I was dealing with. And eventually we had a child, and after about 3 years we divorced. And by the way, over the years he stayed trying to find his way, and he died in 2015 of cancer. And I believe that when he died, he died a faithful Christian. So I guess in the scheme of things, a soul's worth the whole world. It was a real hard time, but I think when we get to heaven, I think maybe it'll matter that we married. And of course, we had a child, and that I loved with all my heart and soul.
Tell me about Jimmy.
Jimmy was just a little shining star with a lot of mischievous glints in his eye. He's real related to Daddy. And smart as a whip. And when he was 8, he was diagnosed with diabetes. So that's about the same year he was diagnosed with ADD. And diabetes and ADD are real conflicting, because ADD, you don't really want to go on a diet, and you really don't want to take shots, and you don't want to go by the rules, pretty much. And so it's a recipe for failure to have diabetes and ADD. But he did well. He graduated valedictorian of his high school class, went to Cumberland University on a full scholarship, and did not finish because he got some bad eye trouble, and he came back home after a couple of years. But he really did well. His daddy was faithful to him always, and he had a good relationship with both of us. So that was a big help. He died in 2013. He was under real tight control, which wasn't the case earlier. He's really, really taking care of himself, and so his blood sugars couldn't vary a whole lot, and he had kind of a high blood sugar just before dinner one night at his own home. And he told a buddy on the phone, "I think I'm going to go ahead and give my insulin. I'm really tired. I'm going to lay down for a while." And he went to sleep and slept through a low blood sugar and died.
He was 34.
34.
And how did you deal with that?
It was very difficult. It was very difficult, as you can imagine. My goal for him was to grow up and become a Christian man. And he did that. He did that. When he was, I think I told you one other time, when he was about 7, I used to record his nighttime prayers. I think he was somewhere between 5 and 7, and one night in his prayers he said, "And dear God, please look after the devil. Help him.
Pray for the enemies."
And so when the prayer was over, I just had to ask. I said, "I'm just curious. I don't think I ever taught you to pray for the devil. I don't think your Sunday school teachers have taught you. What made you think to do that?" And he said, "Well, Mama, Jesus didn't die for him, and he doesn't have any hope." I lost him too early for me, but if you start out thinking I'm going to raise a child to be God's child, and then you believe that happened, the time element's not as important as the destination.
People watching this program many know Ira North, who was a preacher here for many years, and many don't. But Jimmy really thought a lot of him, didn't he?
Well, and Charles, my husband, thought a lot of him. And actually, he was instrumental in getting that executive clemency. He was a big help with that. And Jimmy's daddy named him after Ira North and his grandpa, so he was James Ira. And from the time he could walk, Brother North always had a flower on his lapel. Jimmy, the minute services were over, Brother North would be at the door, and Jimmy would make a beeline to him, and Ira would pick him up and hold him, and they'd shake hands, everybody leaving the building, and then he'd always pin that flower on Jimmy.
And that's a good lead-in for this video. Steve Bonteford was at the memorial service speaking, as was Joe Beam and others. Let's roll that.
And of course, Jimmy wanted to be a part of going to the funeral, and she took him to the funeral, and he wanted to go get Brother North something. He wanted something special because Brother North had always given him these boutonnieres, and Jimmy proceeded to get the ugliest plant that anyone could come up with. I mean, it was horrendous. It was horrible. But Debbie saw his heart, and so there's the first Christ-like example. She saw his heart of her son who wanted to do. She said, "You get it." So you don't worry about what people think. When Jimmy brought it up there, the North family, second example of Christ-like. It's like, you've heard the story of the chief seat. You know, give the person who has the least the chief seat in your assembly, your worship. That's what they did with the plant. They gave it the chief plant seat. They moved all the plants aside and put Jimmy's up there, right there in the middle, so everybody could see it. Now, I love the Lord, but I love seeing the Lord example in action here. And those moments like that are priceless.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Where'd that plant come from?
It came from the florist on the next street over, but it was an orange croton with green and orange leaves, and then he picked out a little blue boy in his pajamas praying in blue pajamas, and they fixed it on that orange leaf, and he couldn't understand sending a plant, so he carried it. He hand carried it to the funeral and took it down there, and they proceeded to put it in a real good spot. That made him happy.
Very good. Well, why do you dread New Year's Eve? Why did you dread New Year's Eve?
Well, from the time I really started to understand about Jesus, I also came to understand about the evil one. Because from the time I guess I was about 15 years old, every New Year's Eve, some evil being would be in my ear saying, "You know, here you are again. Last New Year's Eve, you made a resolution that you were going to lose this weight. And here you are now, heavier than you were then. And you have not done what you said you would do. And you're a woman of God," especially when I got into my 20s, that would start up. You're God's woman. You honor God, you love God, and you have said to him, you're going to lose this weight. So a woman of God doesn't continue to fail. You need to stop this. And every New Year's Eve it would start, and it would go right through New Year's Eve, and it would be over with until the morning. And the evil being just kept telling me that because I was God's woman, I needed to end my life. I needed to stop it and put a stop to this. This was like a big lie. It was a big failure. And if I was going to be a woman of integrity and God's woman, that I would put a stop to it.
So you had thoughts of suicide?
Every New Year's Eve it came to me. And sometimes it was so convincing, I'd think, you know, I'm really not making any progress on this. And I just, I didn't know what to do. And there was really nobody in my world that I could tell about that. And it kind of sounded flamboyant, I thought, but it was really true. And when I was 55 and weighed 326 pounds, I was having reflux into my vocal cords, and they told me I had to have surgery for reflux.
Let's see a picture here.
Okay.
While you're talking here.
And yeah. Miss America. And they said I had to have surgery, and I thought, well, if I'm going to have surgery for that, I want more out of the deal. And I went looking. I would have never had bariatric surgery. It would never have occurred to me. But I went looking for a bariatric surgery that would end reflux and normalize my weight. And I found it. And it was a surgery that took 20 minutes.
Tell me about that. How does that, is that where you staple your stomach, or what is
Well,
that?
they stapled my stomach and made it the size of a large magic marker. And then they went down several feet and brought the small intestine up and hooked it to the bottom of the stomach, so that food went down that little stomach and further down the line, and all this 12 feet, a small bowel never got food in it, and that's where you absorb fat. And so I had a bypass, and they put 5 little half-inch marks on me and did that in 20 minutes. And I could have stayed in town to do it. I had lots of friends, surgeons and anesthesia people, but I found a guy that was doing that surgery, and he was doing it. It had long-term success. It wasn't that dangerous, and if you got in trouble, it could be reversed in the same 20 minutes. So I went to Las Vegas.
Of all places?
You know what happens in Las Vegas. Dave. And I took my friend with me, who's a physician. She's an anesthesiologist. She's Muslim. She's one of my dearest friends, and she said, "Why are you doing this? I'm going with you, but you should stay in town. Let me put you to sleep." I said, "I've got to do it here, and I've got to do it this way because I researched this. This is my guy. This is my surgery." And by the way, insurance didn't pay for it. The other one be paid for by insurance. I could qualify. But I went, and she went and watched the first surgery. I was the third. She came back during the second surgery, and my Muslim precious friend said to me, after watching the first surgery and seeing what he did and how well he did it, "I know now why you're here. Your God has brought you here." And in the next 18 months, I lost 200 pounds in
How many months?
18,
18 months. 200 pounds.
200 pounds.
This is a shot of Miss Skinny here.
Oh,
But you had some health problems.
yeah,
You almost died, didn't you?
I did.
Tell me about that.
Well, apparently I had fatty liver. Well, I had fatty legs and fatty arms and fatty everything.
Fatty
I also had
liver.
a fatty liver.
Okay.
And I guess I thought that when I lost all that weight, that my liver would be thin too, but it wasn't. And it's a liver is a sponge that filters your blood. So imagine taking a sponge, dipping it into Crisco oil, and then expecting blood to be able to flow through it and be filtered. So over time, about 12, 14 years, it just kind of caught up with me. The fatty liver part did. And there were other things that influenced it. I had some toenail fungus medicine that hurt my liver. A bunch of other things that all kind of the windows opened all at once. And all of a sudden, I was in Hawaii whale watching on a catamaran sailboat, and I just got sick. And came back here and went into the hospital and stayed in the hospital 3 months. And they came to me and said, "You're going to need a liver transplant." And then they came to me and said, "I'm sorry, but we can't give you a liver transplant because you just don't have any family. It takes a village to get a liver transplant." So, and then it turned out God just decided to reach down in that black hole and pull me out, and he did. My preacher, Rusty Corley, came by the day that they brought me the hospice papers. And they said, "You sign these and we'll start taking care of your bills, but we will no longer pursue wellness." And I said, "Okay, my son's gone, my mom's gone, why am I sticking around here anyway?" And Rusty came by every other day and he said, "You know what, you can sign those papers tomorrow. You can sign them next week. You can sign the papers anytime." He said, "I know you can't sit up. I know you can't roll over. You sure can't walk. You can't even write," which I couldn't do any of those things. "But I just think if you'll wait and stick around and give it a chance, that even in that situation, God will find something that you can do." And so I didn't sign the papers, and then I didn't need a liver transplant. Now I'm like the poster child at the liver center because I don't even have a scar left from the event. It's just all gone.
I see a shot of you in the hospital here.
It was grim.
It was grim.
In fact, Joe brought me a refrigerator because there wasn't anything I could eat. I couldn't eat the hospital food. I got down to 98 pounds, And I would bring food in and put it in the nurse's station, and somebody would eat it or get tossed out. So Joe brought me a little refrigerator and put it in my room, Joe Beam, so I could have something to eat in my room that I would eat. And I just had a lot of that kind of support. And people praying for me. I've got 3 bushel baskets of cards at my house of people that sent me cards. I had no idea what a card ministry could mean, and I do now.
Did my wife visit you during that time?
Your wife, Martell, was with me the night that the place where I was for rehab hadn't given me the medicine that kind of was on my list of things to get. And so my brain wasn't filtering ammonia, and my liver wasn't taking care of it. And I kind of went into a coma, and she was sitting with me. And she noticed something was wrong, and she told the nurses, and they said, let's just let her sleep. I'm sure it'll be fine. But she just wouldn't let it go. And she called some other ladies that had been with me that knew how I was, and they all said, no, we haven't seen anything like that. And so Martell pursued it until my anesthesiologist friend came, and they just put me in an ambulance and sent me to Vanderbilt Hospital, or I would have just laid there and died. Martell, she saved my life. She was there that day because God put her there that day, and she was just astute enough and just wouldn't be poked down when they told her not to worry about it. She was my advocate, even though I couldn't even react to her or respond to her. And she did. She saved my life.
So you've had a lot of God things from Michigan down to Nashville.
Oh, I have. I basically have a sense that I have been in God's hands since I was a toddler. He's been with me. The Holy Spirit has guided me. And the biggest thing for me was to try to become sensitive and notice when a door opened. To stay close enough to God to see the doors opening. And it's been the most incredible journey. We've all got an incredible journey. This one just happens to be mine.
Any advice you'd give to people maybe who have less faith than you, and how God works in their life? Sometimes we doubt when bad things happen to us.
Yeah. Well, and life is a lot of work and a lot of trials and a lot of consequences of decisions. And even if you're somebody who has the best of intentions, sometimes you still make decisions that lead you into storms. And you just have to depend on God to lead you through the storm. I'm not going to live forever. He didn't save me from that disease so that none of us are getting out of this alive. He just didn't decide to let me get out then. And since then, my life is it has bloomed. And I've retired from anesthesia, but I'm still kind of a caregiver. And sometimes I help people at church that need a little nurse to come do things for them, because I still keep my licenses and things. Could go on a mission trip probably as a nurse, and but not working anymore. And just, of course, I'm dealing with the animals a little bit. That's joyful, very joyful for me.
Let's talk about that. You are a caregiver for wild animals. You have a bunch of cages in your backyard. Thinking of shed.
Yeah, that's the inside of my greenhouse.
How did this all begin? You saw one.
Marcia
Brewer
brought me 4 little tiny pink baby possums that got left in her yard when her dog scared a mama. And they'd fall off, and mama possums don't come back like other animals do. So she called me and she said, "You're a nurse.
Yeah.
Do something." I said, "Well,
you give them gas, can you?"
I know nothing about possums. But turns out they eat the ticks that cause Lyme disease, and they don't get rabies, and they don't get distemper. They only live about 2.5 years, but they do things for us that are incredibly valuable. And if all the baby possums I've taken care of, just one of them eats the tick that would have saved your grandchild, the whole thing's worth time.
So how many animals do you have now, wild animals?
Well, I had to overwinter.
Did you bring any with you? Sometimes you bring them to church.
No, sometimes I have to. When I'm feeding them every 3 hours, they have to travel with me. But these are all in cages. They're overwintered. I have 8 squirrels and 2 possums. And I'm just hoping I get them all released before they make babies. I don't want to start over.
A picture of an owl, I believe. Is this a...
Oh, yeah.
What's the story behind this?
My name, because I'm a licensed rehabber, is on the Tennessee TWRA website as a as a person to call for help. And these people called a couple other numbers that didn't happen to answer, so they got me. They found this owl, and it had broken wing, and they'd been to a raptor display show that afternoon to see falconing. And they get home, and there's a wounded owl in their yard, and so they called until they got me. They brought it to me, and while I don't take care of raptors, I take everybody in, and then I funnel them to the specialty people. And we have transporters that don't know anything about animals, but they will move a box with an animal from point A to point B. I had a transporter that moved one sparrow to Chattanooga. I mean, they're just incredible people. And this owl stayed with me for a couple of days. I got it out of pain, got it some antibiotics, and found the raptor people, and it went to Tullahoma, and is doing real well. And it'll be released if it can pass through mouse school.
Yeah.
They have to let a mouse go, and it has to be able to catch a mouse to prove that it can go
But
back.
this interest began late in life. This wasn't back in your childhood in Flint.
I always loved animals, and I'd had kittens, and I had some baby mice in a field one time that I fed.
No possum.
Never a possum.
Yeah.
Never a possum. No. I was influenced a little by Betty White. She was such an animal advocate and loved them all, and she was a real ahead of her time kind of a person in that
What's
regard.
the largest animal you take in? Do you take in a deer?
I had 12 fawns last year.
Really?
Uh-huh. And I found places for all of them to go, but I've got a guest bathroom that's all tiled, and so I can keep a deer or even twin deers.
But you don't live on a farm.
No,
These
I
are
live
your
in East
bathroom.
Nashville in a subdivision, so I can't keep them.
What do your neighbors think about this?
Well, I own the houses on either side of me, so I pick my neighbors, and that gives me 3 backyards.
I see.
And so I keep releasing the squirrels at my house. I don't release the possums in the city because they become speed bumps, but I let the squirrels go, and they're everywhere. If I go outside, they run up my leg, and the squirrels are everywhere. More squirrel nests in my yard per square inch.
Wow. What's your favorite animal that you take in? Squirrel?
I guess squirrels.
Squirrels.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can they be mean and bite and scratch and?
Well, it's not that they're mean. They've just got Edward scissor hands.
I see.
And even if they just do that to you, they can just lay you open. I had one, their eyes are on either side of their head, so they don't have any depth perception like we do. And so if you go to feed them a nut, they might just bite your thumb and not realize
I
it.
see. I see.
And of course, they can get mad too, like anybody else, but they're very dear. And they're great parents. And I've learned to return the ones to their mothers if they fall out of a tree or a tree gets cut down. We've learned to play the baby squirrel sounds on YouTube, on a Bluetooth speaker or on your phone, and leave them out, and the mama will come and get them and re-nest them. They apparently have multiple nests anyway, so they've got places to go, and that way. And I had a non-for-profit give me an incubator, which was a real game changer because these animals all have to be fed about every 3 hours round the clock.
The squirrel whisperer.
Squirrel whisperer, the possum whisperer.
Hey, Debbie, I got a question. Do any of your neighbors have gardens, vegetable gardens?
What, I'm sorry?
Do any of your neighbors have vegetable gardens?
No.
I can
anymore?
believe that because I tell you, the squirrels take care of all the green tomatoes that I can raise.
No, but I have 2 cats, and they're both optimists. They sit under the tree where the squirrel feeders are, and they just make squirrel sounds, hoping that one day somebody will jump in their mouth.
Do you have bird feeders?
Yeah, I have a tree that has like 6 bird feeders on it,
Wow.
and the squirrels are everywhere on it. It's just like in motion.
Yeah. So how much do you pay for your bird food?
Oh, it's substantial.
Right, right.
Does the city pay you for any of this?
No,
No.
no, no.
Maybe they should.
Well, most of us, it takes about 300 hours of volunteering, like at Walden Puddle and taking online classes. Then you have to submit a lot of papers to get licensed.
But do you get emergency type calls late at night?
All the time.
Really?
Yeah, and some of them are emergencies to the people, not so much to the animal. I got a 3 a.m. call one time, and they said there's a baby raccoon in the road, and it was there all day yesterday, and now at 3 in the morning, it's still there.
I see. Anybody else?
Hi, sister. I really enjoyed hearing you. I was really inspired by that. But I had a question for you. I went through similar to the same stuff that you mentioned about suicide. When you, because due to your overweightness, did you have any perception of God when you had those suicidal thoughts?
What do you think of God when you had those thoughts? What went through your head?
Well, the way it came to me, it was, if you're going to be God's woman, you need to stop this. And so it was like, if you're God's woman, you won't continue to live. It was really upside down in the way it's always presented to me. And by the way, when the weight came off, I never heard any more from it, ever. I'm sure I get attacked on every other subject, but I've never heard that voice again after I lost the weight.
And when you say voice, what do you mean by that?
It wasn't an ear voice, it was a brain voice. It was just in my brain, and it was just, there were a lot of people that were concerned about me as I grew up, about my weight. I had some heavy grandmother, and
When you say concerned, were they concerned or were they making fun?
they were just critical.
Critical.
And when I brought pictures to you, and I said I've just always been this overweight kid, and I got to looking at the pictures, I wasn't really overweight till I was about 16 or 17. But the perception was that I was overweight, and I was a believer.
So as I psychoanalyze you, that kind of weighed on you over
Yes.
time and
Exactly. Exactly.
brought on the suicidal thoughts, perhaps.
Yeah. And just, if you're going to be a good person, you will stop living. It was like that. It was an involuted lie. It's the author of lies. And he used that against me. And really, it was a real trial. I could feel it coming on every New Year's Eve. I stopped making New Year's resolutions years and years ago, but it would still continue. And I'm so grateful. I'm grateful for my health in general. I want to be a little old lady. I just want to die a little bitty little old lady at my house. At my house.
But not tonight.
I want to, not tonight, but whenever. I want to die at my house, horizontal, assuming room temperature, listed where they mention you in alphabetical order in the newspaper, at my house.
All right.
And because I got so sick the night that Martell was there,
Yeah.
I would have died and I wouldn't have even noticed.
Yeah.
And that stuck with me, that fear. People will tell you that. Other people have told me that fear of the unknown and of going through that, it's just, it's sort of gone. It would have been easy.
Deb, you're an amazing woman in a lot of ways, and I love you dearly. You're the only woman I've ever met who built her own koi pond.
Yeah. Well, they've been out there now for 25 years.
Have you ever had to take care of any of them with illness?
Yeah. One of them got this pine cone disease where all the scales stood up like a pine cone, and he died. Goldie died. And he was that big, and you don't just lightly bury something that big. So he got put out for the raccoons for enrichment.
Thank you.
Just one comment. I've known Deborah for many, many years, and she's taken care of people for decades, particularly single women. The fact that she's taking care of animals now is just a natural progression of the fact that she's always been someone who cares for the people or beings of whatever kind that needed help.
Oh, so nice.
Another question. Comment.
Talk about swimming with the whales. What was that like?
Swimming with the whales.
Swimming with the whales. I thought that my son and I used to dive together. Well, I thought when I dove the Great Barrier Reef that would be the top of my bent. But when I got to Tahiti, and there weren't any rules that you couldn't swim with the whales, and I was out in an 8-passenger boat, and there was a whale with no baby and no male pursuing her, and the guy said, "Get in the water if you want to," and it was just the most incredible experience of my life. It just, you could, when that whale, you know how they make that sound, like that? The sound just went through my bones. And then that whale, after 45 minutes of letting me swim around it, it decided to leave. It didn't escape, it left. And it turned its fluke around, and I was on a snorkel, and it went boom, right in my face. And I was head over tea kettle, and by the time I figured the bubbles were going this way, the whale was long gone. But it was just, I just felt like the Lord squeezed my hand by letting me be there. I did. And the one thing I would say is that when I thought about I wanted to move to where a lot of God's people lived, and I got here and I met so many people, so many precious people, I have just been blessed beyond measure. But right now, I'm in a ladies' class on Sunday mornings and that ladies' class on Monday mornings. And the level of scholarship of those ladies and the talent that they have for teaching, I'm coming to believe that after all the fabulous, wonderful people that I've met and learned from and been enriched by, I think the people that I moved from Flint to be in Nashville, Tennessee with, I think it's those ladies. It wasn't so much teenagers or young 20s or the richness of that class and the knowledge of those ladies and the integrity of those ladies. This is what I moved here for.
Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so
sharing
much.
your story.
Thank you.
Well, we opened with a Facebook comment about a squirrel. We're going to close with some comments also on your Facebook site. These are some things Grandpa taught me. I don't know if he really taught you these, but this is what was on your site. You may have forgotten these.
Okay.
Things that Grandpa taught me. Life is simpler when you plow around the stump. The best sermons are lived, not preached. Don't squat with your spurs on. Don't judge people by their relatives. You can't tell how good a man or a watermelon is until they are thumped. Always drink upstream from the herd.
Oh, boy.
That's wise. And another place on your site, you had a picture of Jesus in a white robe, and a quote was on that site that said, "When you're hanging on by a thread, make sure it's the hem of his garment."
Oh, yeah.
Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Well, do you have a story of amazing grace? If you do, take time to share it with someone this week, and we'll see you next time on Stories of Amazing Grace. So long.